Welcome everybody to the Industry Insider preview of the Cannabis Water Report. My name is Derek Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Resource Innovation Institute, and it is my honor to welcome you all and thank you for spending 20 minutes with us here today. For those of you who don't know MJBizCon, it's the annual event of the cannabis industry, typically held in Vegas. If we were doing this there, we might be giving away some water bottles to you all, but we're not doing that this year in this virtual format. This is Associations Day, which is the nonprofit gathering of all the nonprofit groups serving the industry. It's their chance to connect with each other and also engage their audiences in some important work that they're doing. So thank you again for joining us. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about RII in just a minute, but what I want to start off with first is this slide, which really underscores the reason why we're here today, which is the need for accurate data about resource usage in cannabis cultivation. And this slide is old, this chart is old, and it was published in the Washington Post some years ago. And the data that underlies it is actually even older. And what's important to understand about this data here that represents cannabis as a very thirsty crop is that this is actually based on one model, an extreme model of the illicit market evaluation that was done by the state many years ago. So this is not reflective of today's water usage in today's dynamic cannabis cultivation marketplace, and therefore underlies the reason why we are all here today. Because we know that 6 gallons per plant per day is not what this plant is typically consuming. And yet we don't know exactly what that number is. And so what we set out to do as a large group, and what we'll talk about together as a large group, is how much water is this plant actually consuming, and what are the various factors that are influencing how much it's consuming and when. Go ahead to the next slide, please. So what we're going to do today over the next 18 or so minutes is I'll introduce RII, and Gretchen, our technical director, will introduce a little bit more about the Water Working Group and the Cannabis Water Report. New Frontier Data. Unfortunately, John Kagia cannot be here today. He had a horrible family emergency that he's on a plane right now going to Kenya. So all of our prayers should be with him. John's a phenomenal partner. He is missed today, but he is a significant contributor to this effort. So I'll, as best as I can, stand in for John today. And then Chris Dillis from the Berkeley Cannabis Research Center will present the data they've been working on in California and offer some policy considerations. So briefly, I'm going to tell you about RII. What we do is accelerate and validate resource efficiency in cannabis cultivation. We look at the issues of energy, carbon emissions, water, and waste. And we operate as an objective, data-driven nonprofit, and I think you'll see that today. We've been around for 5 years. We have a lot of expertise in a lot of different areas, and we're pleased to be supported throughout all of the work we do with a lot of collaboration. What we do is we measure, we inform, and we verify. So we measure resource efficiency, we establish the KPIs, benchmarks, and baselines for the industry so that decision makers like governments and utilities and industry leaders know how to understand what are best practices, how to instill them, how to support them through good policies, good utility programs that provide incentives on technology that is saving energy, as an example. And ultimately what we're out to do is to verify what are these techniques and technologies that are driving the most efficiency, and how can we make sure that they are supported and cultivators can be supported as the market unfolds. We surround ourselves and are lucky to be collaborating with all of these organizations and in these silos. And I think what we do, that is very unique is that we bring all of these multidisciplinary actors together to solve issues around resource usage. Go ahead. And the heartbeat of what we do is really at our Technical Advisory Council. And you'll hear about the Water Working Group, which is one segment of the overall Technical Advisory Council. This is the group of all those actors that we just showed you that are coming together to help us guide the development of standards, shape tools and resources, and advocate for informed policies, incentives, and regulations. We publish a lot, and what we're talking about today is in this third column of collaborative reports on resource usage, where we partner with New Frontier and organizations like the Cannabis Research Center. But we also publish best practices guides for cultivators on a number of topics, primers for governments and utilities so they understand the industry and how to approach it and how to support it toward efficiency. And then we publish a number of reports for our members. So to today's topic, the Water Working Group. I want you to look at the list of the organizations that are here. A number of really meaningful companies and other organizations that are supporting this industry overall, and that have taken time out of their normal efforts to be part of the Water Working Group and to come together to standardize information and to investigate these issues around water usage so that cultivators can have confidence in taking steps that can be more efficient, and that all these other decision makers can be accurately informed about the range of water practices in today's regulated market, which is quite dynamic. So please give all these companies and organizations a round of applause. If you're on the call with us today, do a shout out in the chat. You all deserve the recognition as thought leaders, and we really appreciate working with you all. Okay, so with that, I'm really thrilled to hand it off to Gretchen Schimmelfinnig, our technical director, who's going to walk you through a little bit more about the water report. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Derek. I'm going to play a video just right now while I talk. So what you see here is a partial view of some of the water management activities performed in an indoor cultivation operation, such as water treatment, water storage, fertigation, and not pictured other non-cultivation processes, such as water for heating and cooling processes, fogging for humidification, pest management, cleaning activities, and maybe domestic water for different employee needs. So this is what we were thinking about when we first started ideating on this report. And thanks to Grodan and their customer, The Originals, for sharing this nice video. What we also wanted to think about is how can water move into, throughout, and out of the facility? And when we set out on this project, the first question we asked of the Water Working Group is, how can we establish a common standardized way to take in and evaluate data? And the Water Working Group advised us on upgrades to the Cannabis Power Score, our resource benchmarking platform, to support the data needed for the Cannabis Water Report. So I'm going to quickly introduce you to the Cannabis Power Score and how we used it to support the development of the Cannabis Water Report. So since 2017, our Technical Advisory Council and working groups have helped us improve our Cannabis Power Score benchmarking platform. PowerScore provides free and confidential ranking of resource use based on both area-based and production-based key performance indicators, which you can see in the top left image. This shows a performance benchmark report. The ranked data set of validated and aggregated PowerScore records is used to inform cultivators, designers, manufacturers, governments, and utilities on how to achieve more productive and efficient operations using these individual facility records in comparisons to the ranked data set. The platform is also used for growers in states like Massachusetts to report resource consumption of their operations to comply with regulatory agencies. So when a PowerScore record is created for a facility, the performance benchmark is produced and shows the facility's calculated KPIs and overall facility ranking to peer operations based on a year of resource consumption and cannabis production. PowerScore has a dashboard, which you can see in the top right, with competitive reports that analyze portfolios of facilities and their KPIs against those in the ranked data set. Portfolios of performance benchmarks can show competitive efficiency and productivity performance of a farm over time, or groups of facilities. The chart on the bottom left summarizes the water efficiency KPI of a portfolio in orange compared to the ranked data set in green in gallons per square foot for indoor, outdoor, and greenhouse operations. So for the Cannabis Water Report, we expanded the water questions on the PowerScore survey, and we also created a new water analysis report that RII staff used to aggregate and generate new water KPIs for the different data sets used for the analysis. This is an outline of the Cannabis Water Report. I'm going to describe a few little subsections inside the outline to illustrate the key benchmarks that we created so that New Frontier Data could roll up this information to create an estimate of total industry water consumption. So to set up the report, we're going to explore water and cannabis cultivation and how we're going to move beyond 6 gallons per plant per day. We're going to discuss how cannabis is grown, where water is used, like what I was discussing with that video from the originals, how water is used, and the water energy nexus, and ultimately settle on what water is used as well, what sources and when. The water benchmarks section will describe our background and methodology, summarize PowerScore and how it was used, and identify limitations in our study. And then we will describe our 3 major water data sets that we used for the report. The PowerScore ranked water data set, which is national, covers multiple states in North America. The Northern California 2019 data set, which covers many facilities, both outdoor and greenhouse in Northern California, and the Michigan 2020 data set, which covers a small set of indoor facilities in Lansing. The key benchmarks that we explored include water productivity in grams per gallon, water efficiency in gallons per square foot, water demand in gallons per month and gallons per plant, facility water demand in gallons per year and gallons per month, cultivar water demand in gallons per plant, soil media types, water sources types, and water storage rates in gallons per year and gallons per month. So using these different key benchmarks, we identified a few preliminary findings, and Derek's going to describe for us some other things that New Frontier Data found so that we can roll up that industry water consumption value and provide strategic recommendations. So as expected, water usage varies between outdoor, greenhouse, and indoor operations, but usage is also influenced by many other factors. For instance, the PowerScore ranked water data set showed outdoor farms using twice as much water each year as outdoor farms in the Northern California data set. So some of the many factors that can influence KPIs include obviously location, also climate, cultivator techniques, grow media, water approaches, and environmental controls. So RII and the rest of the water report team feel that the key benchmarks analyzed in this report support recommendations to move beyond water regulations based on plant count and should instead use canopy square footage. We also recommend that agencies introduce productivity KPIs for compliance, such as grams per gallon of water consumed. At this time, I'm going to hand back to Derek, and we'll talk more about how we brought RII's key benchmarks to an analysis of total industry water consumption.
Thank you, Gretchen. And again, this is me attempting to be John Kagia, which is basically an impossible task. But I think most of you know New Frontier, but they are obviously a leading authority on data and analytics for the industry, and just a great partner to RII. Next slide. What you'll see on the next slide is that the legal market is eating into the illicit market to some degree, and the illicit market is generally, as far as we can tell, a lot less efficient in resource usage generally, energy, water, waste across the board. So this is a good thing from an environmental standpoint. The industry that is regulated is generally getting more efficient. It's generally adopting efficient technologies and techniques and learning from each other, and best practices are beginning to spread. A lot more work to do, but that's the general market of today. Go ahead and next slide. And it's also, you know, the context that we're in is we're in the age of climate change, and droughts are increasingly common, and it should be understood that a significant portion of the production of cannabis is in Western states that will be consistently affected by droughts. And so the imperative of figuring out how to be more efficient is critical for just business operations, not only for the rest of agriculture and humanity. And so it's important to understand the differences in, as Gretchen was beginning to lay out, the different ways that this plant is cultivated, the different growing environments, the different techniques. There's almost no one set of things that are done. Almost every facility is doing something slightly different. And so it's important to understand not just an aggregate number of usage, but what is happening within each of the types of cultivation, indoor, outdoor, greenhouse, and then again, continue to peel back from there to look at climate zones and other factors. And it's also important to understand that, as the industry grows, water usage will continue to grow. And this is an example of the charts that we will feature in the report when it comes out in its final form in a couple months. Next slide. It's also really important to understand, and I think this is where cannabis gets misunderstood and, a little bit too overreaching of extrapolation from the illicit market and trying to compare this plant to other crops and blame this plant for, a lot of challenges that we're facing from an environmental standpoint. There's some blame to go around, that the industry needs to be more efficient, and that's what we're here to do and help facilitate, and we've got a lot of support throughout the industry for that. But it's also important to understand that the volume of production relative to other crops is not there yet. And so the total industry water consumption looks like this relative to that of other crops. And again, more detail will be coming out in the report. Go to the next slide. So I think this is the takeaways from the New Frontier perspective. Again, looking at the total industry as a whole, are, a lot of improvements can be made. We need more data. We need to look at the way this plant is consuming differently, and we need to do a lot more of this, knowledge sharing, innovation, et cetera. With that, I'm happy to introduce Chris from the Berkeley Cannabis Research Center. Thank you, Chris.
Sure, thanks, Derek. And before I get going too fast, it looks like we just have a few minutes left. So why don't I just try and speed through this? And if people have questions, I'll just stop and we'll answer questions, because I believe we only have 2 minutes left. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, well, do you want to just move to the next slide, please? So basically what I wanted to talk about was just perhaps what we could see as like a reason for this water report, which I think Derek alluded to before, which is this notoriety that cannabis has received as a water intensive crop, and the fact that this has come from a history of illicit cultivation and these peer-reviewed studies and also popular press articles that dealt with this issue and kind of raised the alarm in California. And at the Berkeley Cannabis Research Center, we've been sort of trying to put data to those questions and understand where this came from, this notoriety came from, and then try and look forward. So next slide, please. So in short, California has this sort of unique, highly biodiverse ecosystem with a lot of endangered fish. And so one of the real issues that came up with a lot of environmental groups is that cannabis appeared to be this new expanding threat to freshwater resources and endangered fish species. And so as a result of these studies, which use this 6 gallons per plant per day estimate and scaling it up, it really shook people. And so next slide, please. And so one of the things we saw was there was a lot of pressure on regulatory agencies to adopt these really strict policies, which, while environmentally protective, have also sort of made it difficult for small farms especially to get up and running in this new regulated industry with a lot of restrictions. And so next slide, please. So what we've tried to look at is, okay, so these sources of notoriety, stream diversions, for instance, we've discovered from early reports from the regulated industry that stream diversions aren't really necessarily the most primary source of water. We're actually talking about well use, which has different implications for when water comes from streams, and it's just to say that a lot more needs to be considered. And one of the things being where you get your water from and how you store your water influences that potential impact. And so I guess, next slide, please. The take-home message is that we're just trying to separate what is going on in a new regulated industry from this sort of illicit history and the narrative that's been established based on that. And so what we're hoping to see is that the policies in California, but I mean beyond California, are tailored that facilitate inclusion in a regulated industry. So we're hoping to see sort of a refinement of where the more stringent policies can be sort of lessened perhaps. And then finally, to adapt policies to what is an exceptionally diverse industry. These pictures I have on the bottom are just from California, and you'll notice they don't even include an indoor facility, which we're very excited about this water report to get a lot of more data on as we were talking about earlier, the diversity of water uses and the technologies that improve efficiency and just help to forge a new path forward for what the narrative around cannabis water use is.
Awesome.
I believe that's my last slide.
Thank you, Chris, very much, and thanks for your partnership. So the report is coming in February. Please look out for it, and we would welcome you to become part of RII, become a member, join our network, sign up for our newsletter, and we'll be sharing a lot more information as we move toward the release of the water report. We're thrilled to have you all here today. Unfortunately, we don't have any time for questions, but I really want to thank MJBiz for creating the opportunity for us all to connect briefly like this. So thank you all. Take care. Have a good rest of the conference and a great week.